Okay, great. So, I know a lot of people think they know a lot of stuff, and they might, but this is the stuff I keep hearing all the time, and I see it everywhere, and it's absolute 100% BS and nonsense. This is the discussion about old tech sensors. I see other YouTube reviewers saying this epic nonsense. This camera's got an old sensor, and you need to update the camera. A camera is not essential. Let's go off some real examples as opposed to my opinions, and this video is not my opinion, it's a fact. Let's roll off some examples. We've got the exact same sensor in the Nikon D600, which came out in 2012, D610, and D750, which came out 2 years later, 2014. Well, these cameras have, all three of these cameras with the same sensor, have exquisite dynamic range, and they kept getting better and better, and the Nikon D750 had much better low light performance. Why? The same sensor. Because a camera is not a sensor. Signal processing, SNR firmware, the interpretation of that signal, all of that goes into the actual output of the camera. This notion of old tech sensor is BS. It's the same sensor in Nikon D4, D4S, D3, D3S. Another example, the GFX, which I didn't bring out here, the 50 megapixel medium format camera, which came out in 2017. Now, 3 years earlier to that, we have the exact same damn sensor in the Panasonic, the Pentax 645Z. Same sensor, 3 years apart. Okay? Oh, well, that's an old sensor. Fujifilm's just using an old sensor. Well, actually, Fujifilm did a few different things. Number one is they have a completely different micro lens design array. I've seen 30 different types of micro lenses or lenses that sit over top of the photo sites. Different designed arrays. Several of them are patented. The GFX has a different micro lens array over the sensor, and it also has completely different signal interpretation than the Pentax 645Z. Same sensor. This notion of old sensor tech is absolute BS. When the rangefinder medium format Fujifilm comes out later this year, or is announced later this year, it will have the exact same sensor in it as the GFX. So we got 4-year spread between the Pentax 645Z came out in 2014 and the medium format rangefinder Fujifilm that's going to come out either the end of this year or 2019. Camera is not a sensor. Here is another example. The X-T2 2016 versus the X-H1 2018. Both of these have essentially the exact same. There's actually about a third of a stop better performance on the X-T2. It's really very negligible. Others report this as well. 2-year spread between those two. Canon does the same thing. Sony does the same thing. A camera is not a sensor. It doesn't work that way. A sensor is not what defines a camera. Countless examples exist in cars where they'll use like a 8-year-old engine. Not only the design, but the engine is 8 years old, but they can crank out a lot more horsepower from an 8-year-old engine than what it was used for back 8 years ago. Well, how the hell are you able to squeeze out a tremendous amount more horsepower? And I don't know crap about cars, but I've watched enough car building shows to know this, that with different transmissions and blowers, these all actually give you a lot more horsepower, right? I'm not talking about nitrous. I'm talking about blowers and different geared transmissions, more efficient transmissions. That is actually the best analogy for camera sensors, that the main board, I should have grabbed a main board for this video, the main board is the transmission and the blower, basically, of the sensor. You know, blower lets in a lot more air, gives you more torque, more energy. Like I said, I don't know about cars, so don't try to correct me on cars, okay? But that is nearly a perfect analogy. So this notion of old sensor tech, I heard this 1,000 posts. People, damn people at Fuji using that same old goddamn sensor in the X1, in the XH1 that they used in the X-T2. It's like, are you kidding me? It doesn't work that way. This is a completely different camera than the X-T2. It's got pro video features, a completely different mechanical shutter with 5-point spring suspension. It's just insanely quiet. The shutter release has been completely designed. All the ergos have changed. It's got a touch screen. It's got a thicker body. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, it's a completely different camera. For photography, the output is nearly identical between these two, however. But this notion of old sensor tech, I mean, that crap really needs to go because it's just nonsense. I keep hearing it everywhere. How did they say they used an old sensor in their new camera? That's crazy. They don't just say that about Fuji. They say that about Nikon. The Nikon people say, oh my God, the Nikon D750 is using the same sensor as the Nikon D600. Yeah, but it has a radically different output. There's a really good example. Much better low light, high ISO performance, and they both, all three of them, the D600, D610, D750, have incredible dynamic range. But camera is not a sensor. Please realize that. Thank you so much for watching. If you like these videos, always click the link below. Tell me to jump off a cliff. Whatever tickles your pickle. Thank you, and goodbye.